My name is Greg Fumes, and I'm a retired Forest Service hydrologist, and I came to visit. And see if the technology works. And the Forest Service assembles, when a fire is greater than 500 acres, of a rapid assessment. It's called BAER, Bird Area Emergency Response, to kind of analyze the effects of the fire and answer the question, so what? I don't know script, so kind of work with me on this. The first thing I'm going to tell you is the easy part's over. It's easy to see a fire. It's easy to put out a fire relative to what might happen afterwards. Rainfall events dance around the countryside. Some are very intense. Some are just kind of showers. So we put together a team. They kind of got together on the 31st, met each other, and then proceeded to hit the ground running. And our job is to assess the risk from post-fire events, be it floods, rockfall, debris flows, and make recommendations to the line officers and kind of beg for money. We've gotten all the money we've asked for. So the first step is to do something we call burn severity, which is what the landscape looks like after the fire and how it may respond to various events. So that's what you see up here is the burn severity map after the team spent 3 or 4 days running around the countryside, kind of doing what we do to see the fire effects on the soil. And that map's going to be available when we have our breakout session tables. It's also posted online at a site called InsaWeb. So an example of a low severity burn, some of the duff is burned, most of the trees don't have scorch, a little bit of needle kill, some of the younger plants may have not made it through the fire, but they're still alive. And basically these are acres we almost walk away from. There's an example of moderate severity, a little rougher, still some needles on the trees, not everything's consumed. It's probably going to respond to some precip events. And then what we call high severity, no cover, no needle cast, lots of ash, and that's kind of the bad actor after a fire. But in our case, we took and the map on the upper right, part of our concern when we do an analysis is the water repellency of the soil. Basically after a fire, there are various things that go on, and basically the soil is covered with almost a waxy substance, usually in the pores, and it beads water. I went out in one area, scraped away the duff and poured some water on the ground, and it stayed there for 10 minutes as just a pool. So that's an example of a very severe hydrologic response area. And the map you see with the gray is basically the area that we consider to be susceptible to rapid runoff and sediment delivery. So we categorize that as severe hydrologic response, and that includes almost all the high burn severity and a lot of the moderate. We then took that and took it the next step because of the nature of the geology in the area that burned. And I always ask this question, was it this steep and rocky before the fire? And it appears that it was. So fires do not cause steep and rocky. And we basically came up with a geological hazard map. Basically, where do we think there could be landslide, mass movement, debris flow potential? Understand, all of this is potential. There's too many words on this slide. But basically, we categorized the burned area within the perimeter and identified about 1,300 acres of unburned, 10,000 at low severity, 7,000 at moderate, and 3,000 at high. I'm kind of in a minority in the community that does this kind of work because I think it's either high or not high. I don't believe in moderate. So I imposed that on the team, and we combined moderate and high and called it high severe hydrologic response, because that's the stuff that's going to contribute to rapid runoff. All that turns into a process. Of course, we're a government agency, so we have to have a form. and that form is FS 2500-8 if you're taking notes. And that's our mechanism to request funds. So we actually had 3 requests go in. Some of it is what I call non-discretionary, closing off certain areas. We've identified vault toilets and floodplains that we feel we need to be pump sanitized and closed for the season. And items like that. There's some wellhead protection we need to do for potable water supplies. So how we get there is we go through this drill and identify values at risk. Remember the question of so what, it burned, is if it's tributary to nothing in the middle of nowhere, we could walk away from it. Unfortunately, that's not the situation here. So one of the ones that jumped out was the Sterling Springs Spring Box and Delivery System, which supplies water to the fish hatchery, to campgrounds, and to private residences downstream. Another bad actor is some of the burned area above Loop E at Cave Springs Campground. In fact, that's the area where I beaded water for about 10 minutes. There's some heritage resources out there that we're not making anymore, so if there's any chance of doing some protection, we'll try and take it. Obviously, water quality, Oak Creek's a listed outstanding water. And so what can we do to kind of minimize or reduce the impacts to that water course? And this is an example of a vault toilet that'll be pumped and put to bed. There are things that, I'd say are out of our control. The upper right picture actually was one I took up on the Okanagan Wenatchee, and that's a wooden debris dam that formed a series of breach hydrology events where the water that goes out of channel forms a dam. That dam builds up and breaches, and you have this increased outflow, and it starts all over again. It stopped at this choke point. It was called Devil's Gulch. That debris dam is 12 feet high and 500 feet long and about 50 feet wide. And it's just rock and trees and more rock and a lot of mud, and it's a problem, especially for the community downstream if this breaks open again. The other 2 images were actually from the Brins fire, where we have events that came down, and the one on my left is the transfer station, and the one on the right is the visitor center. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rory, and I'll leave you with this, that it's all important. Some of it we're going to do first. Thank you.